magical power that protects you from evil as well. And lastly, it operating also as a helmet, as in worn with like armor, I feel that it seems all the more appropriate for my exhibition because I so badly wanted this show to also communicate to the viewer that I'm also speaking of personal battles that we all experience throughout our lives. And I mean that, again, very symbolically and metaphorically, not that we all go off to war and we are in the army, but obviously that we each have our own personal, individual, unique battles that we all go through. Although they may seem to have parallels with one another. As human beings, we all experience very similar things, but nonetheless, they're unique to our own experiences that we have. This piece, again, just as in with the repetitive mark making in this work, was extremely meditative for me as well because everything is made from scratch and hand stamped and assembled by hand, and it just became a very, very meditative, cathartic process for me as well within this work. For the title, Closer to Thoth, I was thinking that it kind of operated and could be read on two different levels, where one, perhaps if you're wearing it as a helmet, it's suggesting that you're that much closer to Thoth, this guide of the dead, and that you're that much closer to death within whatever it is that you're experiencing in this war or battle that you're in. And then lastly, that even something as familiar as the yarmulke that a Jewish man wears, that is believed to bring them closer to God, that perhaps this is some sort of accessory as well for, my idea of spirituality that brings you closer to Thoth or, a higher being, a cosmic higher being. And I'd like to now direct everyone's attention to this work, Have Faith in the Umbros. So, in this work, the viewer is presented with one of my other characters that I created for this exhibition that I discovered throughout my research, particularly in Greek mythology, and it is the Ouroboros, which is the snake that eats its own tail. And Ouroboros actually translates into he eats the tail. Traditionally, it's an image of the snake literally eating its own tail, which then becomes this circle figure. And it symbolizes endless life and rebirth, eternal life, and this cycle that we live, that we are born, we die, and then we are reborn. For me, the snake and discovering the Ouroboros could not have been more, perfect for my idea for my show, because the snake, for me, I had always thought of as something that represented evil, as in with the description of Genesis in, chapter 3 in the Garden of Eden, it's seen as something that's actually evil. But in this sense, I want it to be a very positive, a very positive character. And even furthermore, if anyone knows of the rod of Asclepius within Greek mythology, it's actually the symbol of the snake that's intertwined around the staff that represents healing and rebirth, as well as Caduceus, which is the rod that Mercury holds, and he is the messenger of the gods, as well as the guide of the dead, as well as Thoth. So for me, and I discovered that actually after I made this piece about those two different Greek mythological creature references. In this piece, I'm introducing two new skins, in a sense, that haven't been in the pieces I've described as of yet. On the left, the viewer is given the earthling self, adorned with slices of wood that are held on the body by a tied string. And if we follow the string all the way to the right, we see that there is the almost cosmic galactic self that is meant to be understood as the mirror of oneself. Again, bringing up the idea, as in with the first piece, Not For Long My Forlorn, this idea of self-reflection. I really like to ask the viewer in my work, if I ever have the opportunity like now, that if you see an action, in the work, as in this newly lit match, what would happen if we were to fast forward and realize that the match will then eventually burn down and then have the string catch on fire, and then obviously then the wood would then catch on fire, and then lastly the human being would catch on fire, which in that case would cause the process of cremation. It is believed by alchemists that we are made up of 5 base elements, which is air, earth, water, space, and fire. And once we pass away, that it is the fire within us goes out. And when one is cremated, it's that fifth element that's brought back into play, fire, that allows the human being to be brought back to that initial stage of creation, and which allows for rebirth to occur. And, you know, for me, it's not only about that wonderful concept and, you know, belief and philosophy, but then to also imagine that figure engulfed in flames, and then to see one side dealing with fire and one side almost dealing with this heavenly cosmic figure and thinking of heaven and hell. So that there's this other, you know, facet to the work besides the duality of the snake being good and evil, but also this idea of heaven and hell that actually comes up in the work in my mind. I don't know if the viewer actually takes it that far, but I kind of wish that they would. So lastly, in this space, I would love to draw everyone's attention to the drawing behind you. Okay, so this piece is entitled "The Philosopher's Stone is in You." Again, within my research, I began again with alchemy, and like I said, I discovered this philosophy that the alchemists have of the Philosopher's Stone, allowing for something like base metal, like lead, for example, like I said, being turned into gold magically. And for me, within this piece, I really wanted to emphasize this idea of the Philosopher's Stone actually existing within each of us, and this idea that we are very capable of creating something out of nothing, and that we all have that power to make spectacular, magical, wonderful things happen in this lifetime. One thing that I feel is absolutely worth talking about within this work is the body language that I've decided for the figures to have. Jerry Saltz had an issue with the body language, but he didn't really give me a chance to explain that it's actually, it's supposed to purposely remind us of this idea of praising God, or perhaps, you know, calling to the heavens, or in fact also asking to be saved, perhaps, depending on what your religious background is. But for me, more importantly, I really took delight in this idea of that gesture of the arms being raised, also echoing the idea of the bird's wings being open and spread open, and this sort of relationship back and forth between those two character sets. Again, we're presented with an ibis bird to honor the god Thoth that I've discovered. And here we are given a fourth skin introduced into this body of work, which is the rock, the stone that's being referenced in the title of the work. I really wanted to be that these figures were so interested in this idea of the Philosopher's Stone that it's actually manifested into something that they wear, something that has become like another skin. If you notice that the ibis bird is holding a mirror within its talons, I did a lot of research on mirrors as well, and thought that it was so interesting that the figures, if they are asking to be saved with that body language, that it's interesting for me to think that mirrors were actually also used as a method of signaling for people in need of help, or, you know, maybe to communicate an idea with someone else that's not close to you. So this idea that something that's out of reach, being able to communicate back to you. Furthermore, for that technique to work of signaling, there has to be a light present for that to occur. So I thought, again, I would love it if the viewer got all this out of the work. I never know because I don't get to ask, but I just love this idea of those figures actually being golden, and this idea that the gold reflects the light that then hits the mirror, and then there is this signaling that goes back and forth, and it actually is something that is within reach. You know, it's not as far away as you think that it is. Secondly, with the mirror, mirrors to some represent this idea of the reflection of the soul. And if you notice, the only person in this drawing that's actually brave enough to make the eye contact with the mirror is the figure on the far left. And you'll notice that she's almost in a trance of some sort, or she also possesses some sort of power. It can be read as if she's trying to stop it from happening, or that she's actually experiencing some sort of cosmic connection with her reflection. I wanted it to be that the mirror didn't insinuate a literal reflection of your, like, literal physiognomy, like your face or yourself, but a reflection of the soul that is suggested within the idea behind a mirror being, you know, holding that kind of power. And again, this idea that we all possess that strong power